Welcome to the Garden of Rose. My name is Cécile Masson. I'm the author of Rose Letters of Love to Life. I have the pleasure to welcome Stephen Pope to the Garden of Rose. Stephen, you are a scholar, practicing mystic in the Kabbalistic tradition for 30 years. You translate Greek and Hebrew ancient texts into modern English, allowing the essence of the feminine to reappear.
Yeah.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining the garden and wanting to contribute.
Thank you for the invitation. Yes, and thank you for beautifully summing up what I do. I will call myself a Hebraic Kabbalist in the mystical tradition of ancient Judaism. Yeah.
Beautiful.
But it's beyond any idea of religion or genetic bloodline.
One of the basic structures in the garden is the title of the book. Rose stands for all that is feminine, but could also be read as respect, oneness, synchronicity, and ecology. Letters, love, and life. What is your take on these words when you think of your work?
Well, it means a lot to me. Letters would takes me straight to the letter numbers of the Hebrew script, and they are. I would describe the Hebrew Aleph Bet as doorways or portals between the formless spirit and the universe of appearances, which begins as dream and becomes the manifest world, and that everything is connected. So there's no separation between spirit and matter, except in the human mind, and that's where our problems arise. And in Hebrew, love is ahava, which is Aleph alive, Bet alive. I know that perhaps doesn't mean much to the audience, but it is to live consciously as a divine spark, a spiritual being in your soul, so that your soul awakens and you inhabit fully the universe of forms, which has a dream aspect to it and it has a physical aspect to it. And so that you are aware. Love is consciousness in Hebrew. Ahava is pure consciousness. It has no opposite. Sorry, and the third word was love, letters, and?
Letters, love, and life.
Well, yeah, life. So Aleph, Hey, the letter Hey in Hebrew is breath, to be breathed, the breath of breaths, the spirit of the breath. And it also means life. So the letter Hey in Hebrew is both breath and life. You are a breath of life. You are the breath of life. You are a breath of the one breath, etc. And universal life is being breathed through you, or you are being breathed by universal life. You can take all of those, and that is the power of love, because love is a much misused word. It's not something that can be divided. It is the consciousness of unification and the non-conceptual knowledge that we are multidimensional beings in a multidimensional universe. It's
beautiful. That brings me to the next question, Stephen. We both know that life cannot exist without relationship, right?
Yeah.
There is always some kind of relationship, just more or less visible in our time frame. inside and outside of our perception of reality. As you were talking about the mind just now, that's the reality we create. But maybe there is a completely different logic behind. So in that context, what is the beauty of the ancient letter for you? You know, you are English by birth and you studied Hebrew and practicing Hebrew as well in all your teachings. So in what context does the letter also is in that relationship between shape, form, and formlessness that we many times have already spoken about?
Yeah, I mean, the question is extremely profound and deep. Okay, so I'm just thinking about how I can put this across in a very short interview. Because I know that many of the listeners will probably not know what the alphabet is, or people that do. So I'm just going to say something. Relationship in the alphabet, the Hebrew letter numbers, there are 3 lines. There are 0, 1 to 9, and then it goes from 10 to 90, and then from 100 to 900. So this 0 to 9 is the primary source. And you can say that that is emerging in you. And then the hundreds from 100 to 900 are the, because each letter has a value, a numerical value. The 100 to 900 is a cosmic body, and the decades, or the tens, 10, 20 to 30, 40, etc. to 90, is relationship between the individual and the cosmic. So relationship is how we evolve spiritually. It's we can say we are one with the universe. There are lots of these things. People read them in all kinds of spiritual traditions. We are at one with everything. Our task is to become at one, you know, to become the essence of who we are, where we will be at one. Okay, so we can say these things over and over again to ourselves and to others, but the point of relationship is to feel intensely alive in our form, in our body, in the physical universe, as well as in spirit. So there's a relationship then between spirit and the physical form as we animate that form, like you would do in Tai Chi or Qigong and all those other things that we separate away from the Hebrew Bible. We don't even see the connection between those things.
And these practices are present, and they are present also in the garden, obviously. Yes.
Yeah, and so I'm bringing that in because this is important, because the Hebrew letters are about movement, and movement implies relationship.
Absolutely.
And creation and creativity in Hebrew, okay, that there is no past in the creation story. So people say, you know, that this creation story is about how long did it take God to create the universe, and how old is the universe? It's entirely about the present moment. The first 3 chapters of the book of Genesis, which in Hebrew is the book of Bereshit, is the present moment. And that is where creation takes place, without past or future. There is no past and future. There is no past or future in the creative act. So you're in the present moment, intensely alive, and what it describes is movement and momentum at the level of spirit that takes on form, and that is relationship. Relationship then is everything, because you are an emerging seed of consciousness.
That brings me to the next question, Stephen. That's a beautiful bridge that you've just made, as we had prepared already this little interview. We in the book, in Rose Letters of Love to Life, there is a passage that I shared with you as well.
Yeah.
Rose is sitting with this young man in church, looking at the cross of Christ carved beautifully in old wood. And she feels it into her pocket where she has some seeds from the crop of last year. And they start a conversation about that seed. And at some point, she gets very enthusiastic about that seed and actually says, you know, how much that seed is spiritual, but also physical.
Yeah.
It's important in the context of creation on planet Earth as well. And at some point, she basically says that it's all about, I'm just going to look it up because I haven't, that as we are sitting here in front of the Son of God, it means that the very bread we are breaking on the altar is without life, as the actual spark of any divinity has gone out of it. As she had referred previously in her conversation with this young man to the seeds that are being manipulated at the moment, where some companies are actually allowing themselves to take ownership of seeds that have been around for millions of years.
Yeah.
I know that you are looking at seed as well in the spark of universality, in the spark of creation. So what is your take on this passage where it's really about the relationship of the Son to the Father, or the servant to the greater?
Yeah, well, first thing I'd say, but it's a beautiful passage in the book because as I was reading it, you know, I find, I'm sure many of your readers will feel the same thing of being in this stone chapel. And so it's got a very sensual quality to it, the way it's described, and the fact it's in a thunderstorm, and that she puts her hand into her pocket and she picks up the seed. And the first thing, well, there are so many things that run through that because you reference in through Rose the 1 Corinthians 3:16. You know, did you not know that you are the temple of God? That this is a profound teaching. So this references the book of Exodus, chapter 25, where if you read it, you'll read through the mistranslation of the English that Moses goes up the mountain. He comes back down with a plan for building a tabernacle in the desert. And so we imagine in our mind's eye that we're in a sand. There's sand everywhere. There's maybe an oasis. There's some camels, etc. Whatever people imagine from this ancient biblical landscape, or and then they imagine these people building a tabernacle out of pieces of wood and skins of animals, and then they take off their gold rings, etc., and they melt them down to make the links between the curtains, etc., and then they go in, they build an Ark of the Covenant, and they make it out of wood, etc. So that's what we are taught, but the text is referring to that you are carrying within you spiritually the seed of heaven, which is the seed of divinity, and it's in your heart. And the tabernacle is your physical body. It's also your soul. So your divine seed becomes the power of the Holy Spirit in you that co-creates your own soul. When you're a child, spiritually speaking, it's all done for you by the universal consciousness. But as you begin to become more conscious through experience in relationship with the whole of life, because you're entering into the visualizable universe as a soul. That's what the soul means. It means a breath of life, a nefesh or neshama in Hebrew, that becomes, it carries this seed of spirit, formless. And the seed in Hebrew is yod. Letter yod is 10. It means the power of 10, exponential growth.
Mm-hmm.
That is what you're bringing through the very fact that you've come through your mother's womb into the world. You are carrying this divine seed. And so as we go through lifetimes of coming and going, because Hebraic Kabbalah teaches that we have many incarnations with this one seed of life that we are bringing into the visualizable world. We bring that into our tabernacle, and then we begin through relating and relationship and that awakening to realize that we can have conscious choices within this unfolding of life. And then we are working with that seed. And so we are literally, from the Hebraic text, bringing the seed of heaven to earth. And that's why in the gospel, Jesus says that every seed has to fall into the ground and die, and in that death there is a rebirth, and through that rebirth, which is about us realizing that we are this spirit, this divine consciousness in spiritual dynamic of creativity coming into the visual universe. We create, then co-create our own soul. We begin to participate in that. We're no longer a passenger. We are actively engaged with the sacredness of everything that is arising around us. We know non-conceptually that we are in the sacred garden, to use the metaphor of your book, which is Gan Eden in Hebrew. And one of the misconceptions of the teaching is that the Garden of Eden is something that we've been thrown out of, and but we carry this inside us. The teaching does not say we've been thrown out of the Garden of Eden. It says that we have come into a more denser level, if you like, of formation, which feels solid through the senses. Yet we carry this garden within us, and it's always present. And so we're asked to consciously re-enter, so to speak, that garden and live within it whilst we are living
our day-to-day life.
Day-to-day life, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And at the end,
that was a long answer, but
yeah, at the end of that passage, Rose actually also invites that young man to bow his head. You know, and as you bow your head, you go to the heart. That connects us energetically as well to the greater field of creation again. So that's the relationship as well within the book and with all that we do and we described so far. And in the preparation on this call, of this little interview, you also talked about the the importance of the revival of Lilith and how she's been misunderstood, because in your book, Patterns of Creations, you speak about the wisdom of the letters, but you also mention that very powerful personality, I don't know how to say that, archetype of force, possibly, of Lilith. How would you
Well,
want to say something about that? That's important also for women at the moment.
yeah, it's a very important teaching that has been totally distorted, not just by the patriarchal, nefarious, authoritarian mind. In religion, it's also gone into psychology, and that she remains this demon. And so the essence of what Lilith is, Lamed, Yod, Tau in Hebrew. Okay, so Lamed is the idea of bringing consciously spirit into matter.
Mm.
It's sometimes referred to as the staff of Moses. So her name has two Lameds and two Yods. Yod, I've already explained, is the seed of existence. It's the seed of Aleph, which is Aleph is no thing, all that is, intermittent spark of life. It cannot be contained by existence. And Yod is the only begotten seed or generation or son of Aleph, which you carry in your heart. Every human being and every creature that exists is a manifestation of Yod, the one seed that is exponential growth, the power of 10. It's the seed of the tree of life. In Hebrew, in Kabbalah, you have the tree of life. So this is a really important teaching. It's also there in why is Jesus born in Bet Lechem? Lechem is bread. The house, Bet is the house. And when you spell Bet as a word, it has a yod in it. And Lechem is to nourish and to eat and to sustain life. So it's the house of bread that the divine is born in and comes into the world. And we break bread, that's communion, and we're breaking bread with the whole of life.
And that to come back to Lilith as well, it's an important aspect of the feminine that has been, let's say, also been demonized somehow between either being the holy one or being a whore, basically, allowing many women not to live their physicality, their sensuality, their sexuality in a free way. Some kind of concept that is totally misunderstood, as you were saying just now.
Yeah, so the first thing to say about Lilith is she's not a demon, she is a free spirit, or she is the symbol of free spirit. She brings the seed of heaven into the house of bread. So she brings the seed of the messianic consciousness. This is the birth of Christ in Christian tradition, but so she brings the seed of life and she puts it into your hand. And that becomes your creativity that you run with. It's universal creativity that you then have in your hand. And that comes from Lilith directly. So she brings the seeds of heaven to earth and she gives them to us.
As humans, not necessarily women or men, but as humans.
Yeah, exactly. So she is uncontainable and uncontrollable. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that she's out of control. It means that we cannot pin her down or control this energy. This is spiritual dynamism that she's bringing. Okay, so part of her is that she's the wild girl or the wild woman. What does that mean? Wild means self-determining in Old English. It's self-determining, means that you have no control over her. And one of the reasons she's demonized is because her name also means night. So at night, the stars come out, and they are the seeds of heaven. And we go to sleep. We can't live without sleep. And when we go to sleep, we enter her world. And then we take it for granted. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I will carry on with my life because I have a lot of things to do. It's by the grace of Lilith that you come to awaken in the morning, because she has released you back into the day. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So every night we go to sleep, we're in her world, and some people know when they're in deep sleep that they are in the creative. They've re-entered the kingdom of heaven, as Jesus puts it. And then you are in Lilith's domain. And so in the ancient Mesopotamian and other myths, she is the divine feminine, and she has a masculine counterpart. And they together bring the seeds. She is the person, or she's the part of the couple, the divine couple that brings the seeds of heaven to earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the little mythological story of the ancient world, she says that she brings down the heavenly seed, and the woman and the man may conceive. So she retakes the seed back to the divine masculine, and they decide, will the woman conceive or not? And if they decide yes, then she returns back to earth with the seed and the woman conceives. So that's a short mythological story. And, you know, people might pick holes in that, but the point is that she's a connection between heaven and earth within us.
And within men and women at the same time.
All of us, yeah. So I have my relationship with Lilith, right? I have my own relationship with her. And so the whole idea of these amulets that the women used to wear for Lilith wasn't because they were scared of her. It was to make a connection with her, because she protects life. But we know that when we are in the present moment, in the creative, that every day we are given is precious and sacred. Every day, I mean, in the universe of forms.
Yes.
And when our time comes to die, we re-enter. She brings us back into the other world, so to speak. Now, I'm using language around this, but there's the power of Lilith within me is to hold that connection between heaven and earth.
And there you use, I mean, I know I'm very aware of time.
Yeah.
Using obviously the breath and the spine as a connection as well. So as you come into this garden of rose, what you bring as a special gift is to reconnect us to the ancient texts and uncovering that feminine aspect, isn't it? That is the precious gift that you bring, amongst many other things, obviously.
Yeah.
Is to really deep dive into that translation that has sometimes been misunderstood as well as over the ages.
Yeah, there's well,
All
it's
of
been
us.
mistranslated, and we carry a lot of. There are people that won't read certain books of the Bible because they see it as misogynistic and patriarchal because of the way that it's been translated. So, to put it as simply as possible, the tree of life is presented in the Hebraic text over and over again, and the tree of life is called the Asherah tree, and Asherah is the primal creatress of heaven and earth, of the Semitic peoples. Yes. And it's feminine, and it's out of the feminine that the masculine arises.
And not the other way around.
And not the other way around. The feminine is the initiator in every human being of evolutionary spiritual change. Yeah. So we embrace, as men, we embrace the feminine within us.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for this interview. And I'm sure we will hold other conversations as well in the Garden of Rose. But for all that listen to this, please check it out, the Garden of Rose. And very shortly, you will keep going with all the courses that you offer in the garden. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.